Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the stars slowly drift past the main viewing screen. His ship had been exploring the outer regions of space for 3 months now, mapping new systems and looking for signs of life. So far, they had found nothing but empty planets and dead rocks floating in the void. The exploration mission was humanity's first real push into deep space. Only 5 years ago, human scientists had finally cracked the secret of faster-than-light travel. Now Earth had 3 small colonies on distant worlds, and ships like Morrison's were pushing even further into the unknown. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange," said Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the communications station. She was frowning at her screen, adjusting dials and filters. "It's not natural background noise. This looks like an actual signal." Morrison walked over to her station. The bridge was quiet except for the low hum of the ship's engines. His crew of 12 had been working together for months, and they had developed a rhythm. When Foster said something was strange, it usually was. "What kind of signal?" Morrison asked. "It's repeating every few minutes. The pattern is too regular to be natural. And Captain, it's coming from outside our galaxy's edge. Way outside." Morrison felt his pulse quicken. First contact with alien life had always been a possibility, but finding actual proof was different. "Can you clean it up? Make it clearer?" Foster worked at her controls for several minutes. Slowly, the static began to fade, and a new sound filled the bridge. It was clearly artificial, with rising and falling tones that seemed almost musical. But underneath the strange beauty, there was something else. Something that made Morrison's chest tighten. "It sounds like crying," whispered Ensign Danny Roberts from the navigation station. Morrison had to agree. Even though the sounds were completely alien, there was an unmistakable sadness to them. A desperation that crossed species barriers. "How long has this been broadcasting?" Morrison asked. "Based on the signal strength and distance, I'd say at least 6 months," Foster replied. "Maybe longer." "Captain, there's more. The signal contains mathematical sequences and what looks like star charts. They're trying to tell us where they are." Morrison made his decision quickly. Set course for the signal's origin, and send a message back to Earth Command. Tell them, "We found something." The journey to the signal's source took 2 weeks. During that time, Foster and Roberts worked together to decode more of the alien transmission. What they found made the entire crew uncomfortable. The aliens called themselves the Villani. Through mathematical formulas and simple pictures, they had managed to tell their story. They lived on a world with light gravity and gentle weather. Their people were tall and thin, with long limbs and large eyes. They had never known war or violence. Their entire civilization was built around art, science, and peaceful cooperation. But now they were dying. The messages showed images of burning cities and fleeing refugees. Another alien race calling themselves the Korthok had arrived. At the Villani homeworld with a massive fleet, they demanded surrender and subjugation. When the Villani tried to negotiate, the Korthok began destroying their cities. "They're not warriors," Foster explained to Morrison as they reviewed the decoded messages. "The Villani don't even have weapons. They never needed them. Their world doesn't have large predators or natural disasters. They evolved without violence." Morrison studied the images on his screen. The Villani looked fragile, almost like living glass sculptures. Their cities were works of art, with flowing curves and organic shapes. Everything about them spoke of a gentle, peaceful existence. "What about these Korthok?" Morrison asked Roberts. Pulled up another set of images. The Korthok were different. They were shorter and broader than the Villani, with thick armor and heavy weapons. Their ships were dark and angular, built for intimidation and destruction. "Seemed to be an empire," Roberts said. The messages mentioned other worlds that have fallen to them. Dozens of civilizations that have been conquered or destroyed. They move from system to system, taking what they want. Morrison felt anger building in his chest. The Villani were asking for help, broadcasting their plea across the galaxy in the hope that someone would hear them, someone who could fight back. The horizon's edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Villani system. What Morrison saw made his blood run cold. The beautiful world shown in the alien messages was now surrounded by dark ships. Orbital stations were burning. Small ships fled the planet's surface, chased by Korthok fighters. Captain Foster said quietly, "I'm picking up hundreds of distress signals. The Korthok are hunting down refugee ships." Morrison watched as a Korthok destroyer fired on a fleeing transport. The small ship broke apart, its pieces scattering into space. There had been families on that ship, children. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," Morrison ordered. Priority 1. The transmission took 4 hours to reach Earth. Admiral. Lisa Carter received Morrison's report in her office at the United Earth Space Command headquarters. She was a veteran of the colony's early days. When Earth's expansion into space had faced many challenges, Carter listened to Morrison's full report, studying the images and data he had transmitted. When he finished, she sat in silence for a long moment. "Tomorrow," Morrison said over the communication link. "The Villani have been broadcasting for months. They're dying while they wait for someone to answer their call for help." Carter looked at the images of the gentle alien species. She thought about Earth's history, its long record of violence and warfare. Humanity had spent thousands of years fighting each other, developing weapons and tactics. They had learned to survive on a world that constantly tried to kill them. "Captain Morrison," Carter said finally, "maintain your position and observe. Do not engage the Korthok forces. I need to discuss this with the government." Morrison wanted to argue, but he knew his orders. He could only watch as more Villani ships died in the void, their people calling out for help that might never come. Carter ended the transmission and immediately contacted President Elena Rodriguez. Within hours, the leaders of Earth's government were gathered in an emergency session. The debate that followed would change the course of human history. The emergency session at the United Earth government lasted 18 hours. President Elena Rodriguez sat at the head of a long table filled with military leaders, scientists, and politicians. The room's large screens showed the images that Captain Morrison had sent from the Villani system. Pictures of burning cities, fleeing refugees, and the gentle alien people who were dying while waiting for help. "We cannot risk exposing humanity to an unknown alien threat," argued Secretary of Defense Robert Kim. "We have 3 colonies and barely 200 ships. If we reveal ourselves and lose Earth itself, could be next." Admiral Carter stood up from her chair. "With respect, Mr. Secretary, we are not talking about a threat to Earth. We are talking about genocide. An entire peaceful species is being wiped out while we debate." The room erupted in arguments. Some officials wanted to remain hidden and safe. Others believed humanity had a moral duty to help. The debate went on for hours, with voices rising and tensions building. President Rodriguez finally called for silence. She looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. These were people who had guided humanity through its expansion into space, who had made the hard decisions that kept the human race alive and growing. "I have made my decision," Rodriguez said quietly. "We will help the Villani. Admiral Carter, you have permission to mobilize the fleet." The room fell silent. Several officials started to object, but Rodriguez held up her hand. "We became space explorers because we wanted to find our place among the stars," she continued. "We cannot let our first contact with alien life be marked by cowardice. If we ignore this call for help, what does that say about who we are as a species?" Admiral Carter nodded. "Thank you, Madam President. I will begin preparations immediately." Within hours, the largest military mobilization in human history was underway. Admiral Carter stood in the Fleet Command Center watching as ships from across human space began moving toward Earth. The plan was ambitious and dangerous. They would gather every available warship and transport, then make the 3-month journey to the Villani system. Fleet Commander Alex Turner arrived at Earth aboard the heavy cruiser Defiant. He was a veteran of the colony wars, where human settlements had faced raids from pirates and hostile environmental conditions. Turner had never commanded a fleet this large, but he understood the gravity of the situation. "How many ships do we have?" Turner asked Carter as they reviewed the mobilization plans. 214 vessels, Carter replied. Ah! Everything from battleships to fast corvettes. We are taking every ship that can make the journey. Turner studied the fleet. Rasta. The ships came from Earth's Defense Force, the colonial patrol fleets, and even some converted civilian vessels. It was an impressive force by human standards, but they had no idea what they would face when they reached the Villani system. Moraine. Colonel Sam Hayes was appointed commander of the ground forces. He had spent years training soldiers for combat. In different environments, from low-gravity worlds to hostile atmospheres, Hayes knew that fighting on an alien world would present unique challenges. 30,000 Marines, Hayes reported to Turner. Every one of them knows this might be a one-way trip. The Marines were equipped with the best gear humanity could provide. Their powered armor could function in different atmospheres and gravity levels. Their weapons were designed based on centuries of human warfare, refined through countless conflicts on Earth and in the colonies. Combat engineer Katie Sullivan worked around the clock to prepare equipment for the unknown conditions they would face. The Villani world had lighter gravity than Earth, and the atmosphere was thinner. Human soldiers would need to adjust their tactics and equipment accordingly. The good news is that our people will be stronger and faster in the low gravity, Sullivan explained to Hayes. The bad news is that our weapons might be too powerful. We need to be careful not to cause unnecessary damage to Villani cities. Dr. Nathan Wells, the fleet's chief medical officer, studied the biological data that Morrison had gathered about the Villani. The aliens were much more fragile than humans, with delicate bones and thin skin. Wells prepared medical supplies for treating both human casualties and alien refugees. Their biology is fascinating, Wells told his medical team. They evolved without predators or environmental threats. Their bodies are optimized for their peaceful world, not for survival under stress. Communications specialist Amy Foster worked with a team of linguists to decode more Villani transmissions. Every day brought new messages from the dying world, each one more desperate than the last. The Korthok were systematically destroying Villani cities, forcing the survivors into smaller and smaller areas. The Korthok seemed to be taking their time, Foster reported. They are not trying to kill all the Villani quickly. They want them to suffer, to serve as an example to other worlds. The human fleet gathered in Earth's orbit, a sight that had never been seen before. Ships of every size and class floated in formation, their crews making final preparations for the long journey ahead. Entire planet watched as their defenders prepared to leave, possibly forever. President Rodriguez addressed the fleet in a broadcast that reached every ship. You carry with you the hopes and prayers of all humanity. You go not as conquerors, but as protectors. You will show the galaxy that Earth's children stand against tyranny and genocide. The fleet began its journey into hyperspace, leaving Earth. Behind each ship carried volunteers who understood the risks. They were traveling to a distant star system to fight an unknown enemy, to save people they had never met. As the ships entered the strange realm of faster-than-light travel, the crews settled in for the long journey ahead. They knew that in 3 months, they would either save an entire species or die trying. For humanity, there was no other choice. 3 months later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Villani system. What Fleet Commander Alex Turner saw through the main viewing screen made his stomach turn. The once beautiful system was now a graveyard of broken ships and burning debris. Korthok destroyers moved slowly between the planets, hunting down the last few Villani refugee ships. The aliens' homeworld, which had looked like a blue and green jewel in the original transmissions, was now covered with dark smoke clouds. Orbital stations that had once been works of art were now twisted metal floating in space. "My God," whispered Turner, "we might be too late." Captain Jake Morrison's ship, the Horizon's Edge, moved ahead of the main fleet. His mission was to make first contact with any surviving Villani ships and establish communication. Morrison had been watching this system for 3 months, helpless to intervene. Now he finally had the chance to help. "Captain, I'm detecting a damaged Villani transport about 2 million kilometers from here," reported Lieutenant Amy Foster. "It looks like it's trying to hide behind that asteroid." Morrison ordered his ship to approach carefully. The Villani vessel was much larger than human ships, but seemed to be built more like a passenger liner than a warship. Its hull was cracked in several places, and one of its engine pods was completely destroyed. "Transmit on all frequencies," Morrison ordered. "Use the mathematical sequences we learned from their distress signals. Let them know we're here to help." Took several minutes, but finally the alien ship responded. Transmission was weak and filled with static, but the mathematical patterns were clear. They were trying to communicate. Danny Roberts worked with Foster to establish a basic communication link. Using numbers, simple pictures, and the star charts the Villani had broadcast, they slowly began to understand each other. Slow and frustrating, but gradually they made progress. The alien captain identified himself through a series of sounds that the humans couldn't pronounce, so they decided to call him Captain Zenthka. Through their limited communication, Zenthka managed to convey that his ship carried some of the last Villani scientists and their children. They had been fleeing the homeworld for weeks. "Request permission to come aboard," Morrison transmitted. Using the symbols they had worked out for basic concepts, there was a long pause before. Zenthka responded with what seemed to be agreement. Morrison selected a small team, including Dr. Nathan Wells and Foster, to make the first face-to-face contact with an alien species. The docking process was tricky because Villani ships were designed very differently from human vessels, but Morrison's engineering team managed to create a secure connection between the two ships. Morrison, Wells, and Foster put on their environmental suits and stepped through the airlock into the alien vessel. The first thing Morrison noticed was how tall the ceilings were. Everything on the Villani ship was built for people much taller than humans. The second thing he noticed was how beautiful it was. Even damaged and filled with refugees, the ship was like a work of art. The walls curved in flowing patterns, and soft light came from panels that looked like they were made of living crystal. Captain Zenthka was waiting for them in what appeared to be the ship's main corridor. Morrison's first sight of a living alien made him gasp. Zenthka stood nearly 8 feet tall, but he was incredibly thin. His limbs were long and delicate, like those of a dancer. His skin was pale blue, and his large eyes were the color of deep water. When Zenthka saw the humans, his eyes widened in what seemed to be surprise. Through their translation system, he managed to communicate basic concepts. He was amazed by how short and solid the humans looked. When he learned that they came from a world with much stronger gravity, he seemed to understand. Dr. Wells examined some of the wounded Villani refugees with Zenthka's permission. The aliens were even more fragile than the humans had expected. Their bones were hollow like those of birds, and their skin was thin and easily damaged. Many of the refugees were suffering from injuries that would have been minor for humans but were serious for their delicate species. "They're like living flowers," Wells whispered to Morrison. "Beautiful and gentle, but so fragile." The humans learned more about what had happened to the Villani world. The Korthok had arrived 6 months ago with a massive fleet. They had demanded complete surrender and the enslavement of the entire Villani population. When the Villani tried to negotiate, Korthok began destroying cities as examples. The Villani had no weapons, no military, and no concept of warfare. Their entire civilization was built around art, science, and peaceful cooperation. They had never needed to fight because their world had no large predators and no natural disasters. Violence was completely foreign to them. Zenthka showed the humans recordings of the Korthok attacks. The alien invaders were shorter than the Villani, but much more heavily built. They wore thick armor and carried powerful weapons. Their ships were dark and angular, designed to intimidate and destroy. The Korthok have conquered many worlds. Zenthka communicated through their translation system. They told us we were weak. They said no one in the galaxy would help us because we have nothing to offer in return. Morrison felt anger building in his chest. "They were wrong," he replied, hoping his meaning would translate correctly. Meanwhile, intelligence officer Danny Roberts had been monitoring Korthok communications from the horizon's edge. What he discovered worried him. The Korthok fleet was much larger than the human force. They had over 600 ships, including massive battleships that dwarfed anything humanity had built. Admiral Turner needs to see this, Roberts reported to Morrison. The Korthok aren't just raiders. They're a full military empire. They've conquered dozens of star systems. Back on Turner's flagship, the human commander studied the intelligence reports. The Korthok had superior numbers, and their individual ships seemed more powerful than human vessels. But Turner noticed something interesting in their attack patterns and fleet formations. They're not real warriors, Turner said to Admiral Carter over the communication link. Look at how they move. They rely on intimidation and overwhelming force. They've never had to fight an enemy that actually fights back. Turner was right. Korthok Empire had expanded by attacking peaceful species like the Villani. They had never faced an enemy with military experience or tactical knowledge. Their success came from their victims' inability to resist, not from superior combat skills. As the human fleet prepared for battle, Morrison returned to his ship with vital intelligence about both the Villani and their enemies. The gentle aliens were everything humanity had hoped to find among the stars: peaceful, intelligent, and worthy of protection. The Korthok were everything humanity had feared: bullies who preyed on the innocent. The stage was set for humanity's first battle among the stars. Fleet Commander Alex Turner stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the Korthok fleet through the main screen. The alien ships were massive and dark, floating in formations that looked impressive but showed no real tactical thinking. Had spent his career studying warfare, and he could see the weaknesses in their positioning. Open a channel to all Korthok vessels. Turner ordered his communications officer. The message went out on all frequencies, broadcast in the mathematical language that most spacefaring species could understand. Turner's voice was calm and clear. As he spoke, Korthok fleet, this is Fleet Commander Turner of the United Earth Armada, will cease your attacks on the Villani people and withdraw from the system immediately. This is your only warning. The response came quickly from the largest Korthok battleship. The alien voice was deep and filled with arrogance. Through the translation system, Warsiefton Vorthek's words came through clearly. Unknown species. You have made a serious mistake. The Korthok Empire has claimed this system. Leave now or be destroyed like all who oppose us. Turner smiled grimly. That's what I thought you'd say. All ships, battle stations, execute attack pattern Delta. The human fleet burst into action. Ships that had been floating peacefully suddenly accelerated into combat formations. Turner's tactical plan was based on centuries of human naval warfare, adapted for space combat. The Korthok had never seen anything like it. Captain Lisa Park commanded the destroyer Vengeance, leading a group of fast ships in the first attack wave. Her mission was to hit the Korthok fleet's flanks while they were still organized in their parade formation. Park had trained for this kind of combat her entire career. All ships, follow my lead, Park broadcast to her squadron. Remember, they've never fought anyone who fights back. Let's show them what that feels like. The human destroyers swept around the edge of the Korthok formation, their weapons firing in coordinated volleys. The alien ships were caught completely off guard. They had expected the small human fleet to attack head-on, where the Korthoks' superior numbers would overwhelm them. Instead, the humans struck like wolves hunting a herd, attacked from multiple directions, hit hard, and then moved away before the confused Korthok ships could respond effectively. Park's squadron destroyed 3 enemy vessels in the first 5 minutes of combat. War Chieftain Vorthok screamed orders at his fleet commanders. But the Korthok ships were slow to respond. They had been built for intimidation, not for real combat. Their crews had never faced an enemy that used tactics and coordination. Lieutenant Commander Tony Mitchell led the human fighter squadrons into battle. His small ships were fast and agile, designed to exploit weaknesses in enemy defenses. The Korthok had never developed effective point defense systems because they had never needed them. This is like shooting practice, Mitchell reported to Turner as his fighters swarmed around a Korthok cruiser. Their guns can't track us, and their shields have huge gaps. Mitchell's pilots had trained for years in combat simulations based on human military history, used tactics developed in Earth's ancient wars, adapted for space combat. The Korthok had no answer for coordinated small craft attacks. Meanwhile, Turner commanded the main battle line from his flagship. The human capital ships moved in precise formations, their captains working together like parts of a single machine. This was something the Korthok could not understand. Their ships fought as individuals, each captain trying to win glory for himself. The battle's turning point came when Chief Engineer Ben Carter made a desperate decision. His ship had been badly damaged in the fighting and his engines were failing. Rather than retreat, Carter ordered his crew to abandon ship and then flew directly at a Korthok battleship. "Tell my family I did my duty," Carter broadcast as he overrode his ship's safety systems. Carter's ship struck the Korthok vessel and exploded in a burst of nuclear fire. The massive alien battleship broke apart, its destruction sending shockwaves through the enemy formation. For the first time in their history, the Korthok had lost one of their great warships. The psychological effect was devastating. Crews who had never known defeat suddenly saw their most powerful vessel destroyed by a single human ship. Panic spread through their fleet as individual captains began to worry more about survival than victory. Turner saw his opportunity and pressed the attack. All ships, close-range engagement. Show them what real warriors can do. The human ships moved closer to the confused Korthok fleet. At short range, human advantages in training and tactics became even more important. The alien ships were individually powerful, but their crews didn't know how to fight as a team. On the planet's surface, Marine Colonel Sam Hayes led the assault on Korthok ground forces. The aliens had established bases around Villani cities, using the gentle population as shields. Hayes and his Marines had to be careful not to harm the civilians they were trying to save. "Remember, we're here to protect these people," Hayes told his troops as they prepared for the orbital drop. "Every shot counts. These aliens have never faced real soldiers." The Marine assault was swift and brutal. The Korthok ground troops were used to terrorizing helpless civilians, not fighting disciplined soldiers. Hayes' Marines used tactics that the aliens had never encountered, striking from multiple directions and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Sergeant Julie West led her squad through the ruins of a Villani city, hunting down Korthok occupation forces. The aliens' heavy armor and powerful weapons meant nothing against Marines who knew how to use cover and teamwork. "They're like big, slow targets," West reported as her squad cleared another building. "All that armor makes them clumsy. They can't fight in close quarters." Back in space, the battle was reaching its climax. War Chieftain Vorthok's flagship was surrounded by human ships, its escorts either destroyed or fleeing. The Korthok commander, who had terrorized dozens of peaceful worlds, now faced an enemy that fought back with skill and determination. "Impossible," Vorthok broadcast as human weapons tore through his ship's defenses. "You are too small, too few. How can you defeat the mighty Korthok Empire?" Turner's response was broadcast to every ship in the system. "Because we fight for something greater than ourselves. We fight for those who cannot fight back." Vorthok's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, and the remaining Korthok ships began to flee. For the first time in their expansion across the galaxy, the Korthok Empire had been defeated. The humans had shown them that there were still species willing to stand up to bullies as the last enemy ships disappeared into hyperspace. Turner looked out at the damaged but liberated Villani system. The real work was just beginning. The silence after the battle was strange. For months, the Villani system had echoed with the sounds of destruction and death. Now, with the Korthok fleet destroyed or fled, there was only the quiet hum of human ships moving through space to help the survivors. Fleet Commander Alex Turner stood in the medical bay of his flagship, watching Dr. Nathan Wells treat injured Villani civilians. The gentle aliens lay on beds designed for humans, looking even more fragile than before. Their large eyes followed every movement of the human medical team with a mixture of wonder and gratitude. "How many survivors?" Turner asked Wells quietly. "About 2 million on the planet's surface," Wells replied, not looking up from his patient. "Maybe another 100,000 in the refugee ships." Out of a population that once numbered 50 million, Turner felt the weight of those numbers. They had saved the Villani from complete extinction, but the cost had been enormous. Entire cities lay in ruins. Generations of art, science, and culture had been destroyed in the Korthok attack. Captain Jake Morrison was down on the planet's surface, working with Marine Colonel Sam Hayes to establish safe zones for the survivors. The Vellani cities that remained standing were architectural marvels, with flowing curves and crystalline towers that caught the light in beautiful patterns. But many showed the scars of Korthok bombardment. The survivors are gathering in the capital city, Hayes reported to Turner over the communication link. They want to hold some kind of ceremony. I think they want to thank us. The ceremony took place 3 days later in the center of the Vellani capital. Thousands of the tall, graceful aliens gathered in a plaza that had somehow survived the bombardment. Human Marines and medical personnel stood among them, looking small but protective. Captain Zenthka, who had become the unofficial leader of the surviving Vellani, spoke through the translation system that Amy Foster had helped to improve. His words were translated into human languages and broadcast to every ship in the fleet. "Children of the world you call Earth," Zenthka began, his voice carrying across the plaza. "You came from the darkness between stars when we had lost all hope. You fought for us when we could not fight for ourselves. You asked for nothing in return." Turner listened from his ship, feeling the emotion in the alien's words, even through the mechanical translation. "We called you human, but we know you now as guardians," Zenthka continued. "You are children of a harsh world, yet you chose to protect the innocent. You are warriors, yet you heal our wounded. You are strong, yet you are gentle with the weak." Ceremony was broadcast across human space, reaching Earth and all the colonies. People watched as their soldiers and sailors stood among the aliens they had saved, many of them helping to rebuild what the Korthok had destroyed. But the real impact of the battle was being felt far beyond the Vellani system. News of the human victory spread through quantum communication networks that spanned the galaxy. For the first time in centuries, the Korthok Empire had been defeated. Other species began to take notice. The Zephyrian Confederacy, a group of worlds that had been fighting a losing battle against Korthok expansion for decades, sent urgent messages to Earth. Their ambassadors wanted to meet these humans who had done the impossible. The Ethereal Collective, an ancient species that rarely involved itself in galactic affairs, emerged from their hidden worlds to study the humans. They had watched the rise and fall of civilizations for thousands of years, but they had never seen anything quite like humanity. Intelligence Officer Danny Roberts brought Turner the first of many requests for help. "Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from 17 different star systems. All of them are under attack by Korthok forces." Turner studied the star charts that Roberts had prepared. The requests for help came from across a vast region of space. Some were from species facing their first Korthok attack. Others were from worlds that had been fighting the aliens for years. "They all heard about what we did here," Roberts explained. "Word is spreading that there's finally someone who can stand up to the Korthok Empire." Turner called a meeting of his senior officers. Captain Morrison, Colonel Hayes, Dr. Wells, and the other commanders gathered in the flagship's conference room. Outside the windows, they could see human ships working alongside Vellani vessels to repair the damage from the battle. "We have a choice to make," Turner said. "We can return to Earth as heroes, or we can answer these calls for help. But if we choose to fight, this won't be the last battle. Korthok Empire spans hundreds of worlds. It could be at war for years." The vote was unanimous. Every commander chose to stay and fight. Within a week, the human fleet was reinforced by ships arriving from Earth. President Elena Rodriguez had authorized the largest military expansion in human history. Shipyards around Earth and the colonies worked around the clock to build new vessels. The Vellani, despite their peaceful nature, offered to help in their own way. Scientists shared advanced technology for ship construction and medical treatment. Their engineers helped design better communication systems. Most importantly, they served as living proof of what humanity was fighting to protect. Captain Zenthka accepted an offer to travel to Earth as the first alien ambassador to humanity. His ship, repaired by human engineers and escorted by human warships, made the journey to the Sol system. When he arrived, billions of humans watched as he addressed the United Nations. "Your species has shown the galaxy that strength and compassion can exist together, Zenthka said to the assembled delegates. You have given hope to worlds that had forgotten what freedom means. Back in Villani space, Turner received his new orders. Admiral Carter had promoted him to commander of the Liberation Fleet, a massive armada that would carry humanity's protection. 2 threatened worlds across the galaxy. The fleet that had come to save one world was now the foundation of something much larger. Construction began on shipyards around the Villani homeworld, where human and alien workers labored together to build the ships that would free the galaxy. Recruitment centers on Earth overflowed with volunteers. Young men and women who had grown up hearing stories of humanity's first contact with aliens now had the chance to write their own chapters in history as Turner prepared for the next mission. He looked out at the stars and thought about how much had changed. Humanity had gone into space looking for their place among the stars. It found it not as conquerors, but as protectors. The Korthak Empire still controlled hundreds of worlds, but now they faced an enemy they had never encountered before. An enemy that grew stronger with each victory, fueled by the simple belief that freedom was worth fighting for. The war for the galaxy had begun, and humanity would not fight alone.